This meeting going to be our March 16th meeting. And first off, wanted to remind everybody, if you didn't already hear it scream at us, the meeting will be recorded. And also, we should have for Zoom attendees, we should have the live transcript function available for you to turn on if you need to do that. Hopefully it captures our voices okay from in this room. And I think that Mark or Jamie will share a link to the meeting materials and agenda. If they haven't already been posted there, you can find that in the Zoom chat. Feel free to log on if you're in person from your computer. You can keep close eye on the chats, but just make sure to mute yourself. And if they're not already there, they'll be there at the end of the meeting. And we'll start quickly with roll call. I guess I'll introduce myself. My name is Renee Juno Hedrick. I'm the chair and lived experience advisor on the council. And my pronouns are she, her, they, them. And I'm happy to be here. This is my first in-person facilitation in this position. So nice to see so many lovely faces that I've always seen over Zoom and in front of the Golden Gate back. We all exist, and that's lovely. So we'll begin with roll call, starting with Iman Nova. Margaret Schultz. Here. If you would say your pronouns. She, her, them. Thank you. Terry House.
Present, she, her.
Leslie Gleason.
Present, she, her, hers.
Eva Dean.
Present.
And your pronouns, Kiva?
She, her.
Thank you. Alejandra Chamberlain.
Present, she, her.
Gabriel Lemus. Here, he, him. Angela Bullock-Hayes. Wayne Earl.
Present, he, him.
Mia Fairbanks.
I'm gonna be absent today.
Okay, thank you. Deanne Perrin.
Present, she, her, hers.
Joe Bruno.
Present, she, her, they.
Tony Usaferi.
Here, he, him.
Sean Ray.
Here, he, him.
Pat Mims. Jay Delato. Here, he, him. Janae Thomas.
Here, she, her.
And Anastasia Padilla.
I saw her earlier, but I think she's here. Anastasia, are you here? Can you unmute?
Yes, I'm present.
And Juno, I saw Iman pop in online.
Oh, perfect. Okay, thanks everybody for being here. And we started a little bit late, but getting everything worked out on the hybrid stuff has been an adventure. Okay, so anybody else who pops in or has popped in since our introduction, feel free, or is not a council member, feel free to introduce yourself in the Zoom chat. You can also say your pronouns if you'd like to. And also, if you're tuning in just via phone, feel free to do that as well. So I think before we get into our normal poll stuff, we should probably quickly just cover a few meeting norms for hybrid meetings. And then Jamie, if I miss anything, feel free to add in afterwards. So first meeting norm I'm gonna try to follow is that I'll be kind of, when we're going to a section with responses, I'm gonna try to refer to the online participants first. That way they don't get forgotten and we don't get into an intense conversation around the table here and we never get to hear from online participants. So that's the first little thing that I'll try to implement as we go forward, but we'll be working together on making all this work out. So first off, masking, as Jamie mentioned at the start, is not required, but it's always recommended. And there is masks and hand sanitizer available back there on that table. if you would like to use one. We don't have the social distancing markers set up yet, but we do have some space around the table. Feel free to, if you need to distance yourself or have that distance from others, feel free to take that distance as well. There is a sign-in sheet being passed around. After I'm done doing this little introduction, I'll sign it myself and continue it around. But once this comes to you, just make sure to write down your name, affiliation, and your email. Lastly, or not lastly, but next, for when you're speaking, we noticed today it's a little bit hard for the online participants to know who's talking. So in general, if there is a conversation or a back and forth, or we're kind of raising a new topic, just maybe raise your hand and say your name before you speak or after if you forget. And that way everybody can kind of know who's talking and we can continue that conversation without too many problems. And for public comments, we're going to try to keep them more limited, not that we have usually too much when it comes to public comments for time wise, but we're going to try to keep a pretty strict timer for public comments because in person, we want to make sure that there's enough time for everything. And lastly, just, consider your own privilege. We're all sharing this space together now, and so sharing space with people online. So we want to hear from everybody, but make sure that you also step back when you've said what you need to say and let others also step forward and say what they need to say. And I think that's all the meeting norms that I had in mind. Jamie, if you have anything to add.
Oh, I think there's just a few more, which I'm happy to talk about, or you can cover. Okay. So the other, sorry, I know this is awkward, like people can't see. So for folks that are in person, and actually if you're also remote, if you can keep yourselves muted and also in this room, minimize side conversation, especially because these mics are awesome, which is great. But that also means it will pick up all your secrets that you're whispering to your neighbor and be distracting. So just ask you to minimize side conversations. If you need to take a cell phone call, like just step out. Food and drinks. So we know this is kind of at lunchtime. Feel free to eat. Just maybe like don't bring fish and cabbage, but and then again, and this is just sort of a basic welcome. Oh, which seat is somewhere? Let me grab your tag. Oh, there it is. Perfect. Just asking folks, we may talk about stuff that's controversial or brings up strong feelings, and that's great. We're just asking folks to be respectful. And so, basically, if somebody is being, hey, welcome. If somebody is being aggressive or behaving in a manner that threatens the group or does not honor these meeting norms that we've set, then they'll be asked to leave. I've yet to see that happen, but we just want to set some promise. So I think that's it. Next. Okay.
Okay, so here's okay. Here you go. Okay, so we normally do our poll over Zoom. However, because we have the in-person attendees as well this time, we're going to do it via Mentimeter instead of on a Zoom poll. Do we have those?
Which home bases? You guys are the masters of this, yes? Yay. Okay.
Okay.
So is it okay, Juno, if I give some quick instructions first?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Mark from Homebase. I'm going to just give some instructions about how to access Mentimeter, and then I'll pass it back over to Juno to facilitate the poll questions. If you see at the top of the slide, it says www.menti.com. You can access that via your computer or your smartphone. So this is the case. This can be the case for folks who are tuning in remotely or in person. And then once you go to menti.com, you use that code there. Normally there's a barcode. For some reason, I'm not seeing the barcode. So apologies if folks are wanting to scan a barcode. But again, if you can go to menti.com and then type in the code, I also dropped it in the chat. So we see folks starting to answer this question here, and I'll pass it back over to Juno, and maybe we can give folks a little bit of time, because right now we only have 11 folks who have participated in the poll. So back to you, Gina.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so the first question is, how many council on homelessness meetings have you attended? And if you're contributing from online, feel free, if you're able to or unable to access Mentimeter, feel free to put your answer in the chat and we'll see them there. Speaking of Jamie, would you mind actually bringing up the chat for us to see?
Huh?
Now we're getting more answers trickling in.
Right, and that's what.
And if you, yeah, we'll make that maybe a little box. Okay. Gave everybody an extra minute to answer that one as we worked out some tech stuff, so we can make sure we saw everybody's chat answers here. So the question was, how many council and homelessness meetings have you attended? And it looks like a lot of us have attended a lot of meetings. A few of us have attended some, and there's a few first-time attendees here. So welcome to y'all first-time attendees. This is an interesting meeting to be the first one, for sure. Okay, so the second question is, do you have lived experience of homelessness? And I actually kind of appreciate we can see these answers live. So feel free to answer in the chat if you're unable to use the Mentimeter app.
By the time you finish all this, I'll be logged in.
We'll miss out on your answers, Tony. No worries.
There's a 13-year-old.
That's running.
Okay, so looks like answers have roughly slowed down. So question was, do you have lived experience of homelessness? And we got a lot of answers in the chat as well. A few no's, a yes in there, a few yeses. And also you can see the results in the graph there in front of us. 19 no's and 12 yes more than 7 years ago. And 2 yes within the past 7 years and 1 yes currently, which is 19 no's and 15 yeses. One person preferred not to answer, so that's lovely to see. So the next question is, what best describes your racial identity? And if you do not see it here, there is an option for it, or I describe myself another way that's not listed here. You can also put your answer in the chat if you feel comfortable.
You don't want that up and on or is it? Yes.
We could probably do captions off for in here.
If anybody would like them on, just let me know and I'm happy to. I can't hardly see.
Okay, it seems like the answers have pretty much trickled down. We'll just let everybody take a look at these answers. Avoid having to maybe save a bit of time. We did start a little bit late, but we can see who's in the room with us and what different racial identities they represent. Okay. And with that, that brings us to the end of our icebreaker who's in the room poll. Thanks everybody for participating. Always, especially now that we're have this hybrid in-person setup, it's really important to know who we're working with. And yeah, So with that, I think if we have any, we'll move on to some accessibility tips from Jamie J.
So I actually am going to share screen for a minute because what I wanted to show folks is there's been some new language added to the agendas. And I want to make sure that folks know how to find that and know what it says. So give me 1 second. So when we post our agendas, they go in this thing called Agenda Center. And when you get your link, like you get an email from us that says, here's our agenda. What I want to show you is, especially people had some questions about parking, right? Parking, especially if you're coming in person, parking can be very special. So at the very top, and so if you're planning to come in person, what we have learned, and Jay just discovered this morning, some of the so the good news is the meters go up to 4 hours and they're pretty cheap. The bad news is some of them take only coins. It's 2023. I haven't paid with coins in forever. So know that going, if you're coming in advance. The other thing is there's not like, it's not very clear where parking is. So on the top of the agenda, there's a link that says County Administration Building Access. We are in the County Administration Building. There's a bunch of information about parking, which includes a map that will tell you where all of the meters are, where all of the different parking lots are. So you could go down a whole rabbit hole. But this is basically the very detailed, complicated map about where parking is. So I just wanted to make sure people knew that that information existed. And let me just go back and see if there's anything else on the agenda that's useful to know. So the other thing to know, just as you're coming into this building, there are sheriff's deputies that are doing the security screening and you have to go through a metal detector. That's just part of us being in a county administration building. Not my favorite, but it's just how it is. So just know that if you're coming in person, that is a thing that you will need to do to come in. Council members are the only ones that are required to be in person. So community members, like we love having you here, but you don't actually have to be here to participate. So just want to make sure folks know that. And I think that's it. And as always, we're really happy to answer questions after the meeting. You can always email me and I'll drop my email in the chat, but just wanted to make sure folks, especially know about the parking because that can be kind of complicated. Are there any questions related to any of that right now? And I'm going to start carrying extra coins because I know this is going to happen for other folks where they need to park and they don't have coins. Okay, that's all I got.
Okay, seems like there's no questions and no questions in the Zoom chat either. So we'll move right on forward. Thank you, Jamie. I know that tip will be greatly appreciated. All right, so we'll move on to public comments. And to remind everybody, this is an open period for members of the public to comment on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep your comments to around 2 minutes. I will step in and we'll keep a timer if we need to, but try to keep your comments for around 2 minutes, and that would be most ideal. So are there any public comments now? Feel free to put a public comment in the chat, raise your hand if you're in person, or if you're in Zoom, feel free to raise your hand as well.
We have a public comment in the back. And Juno, you're doing the timers, yeah? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm happy to do it.
I'm gonna be real quick. I just want to introduce myself. Many of you guys I see on our email communications. My name is Courtney Davis. This is my husband, Daniel Davis. We're the program directors with Love a Child Missions. And this is our first time coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You want to give it just like a 1 sentence, what does Love a Child do?
We are a private homeless shelter for women and children in Bakery.
Okay, and I see Joe with her hand up.
Hi, everyone. Joe Bruno here. Today I'm speaking in public comment. It's just me. And just wanted to bring light to the fact that we're in hybrid, in person, and even though we all understand that it's a state, mandatory thing, it's just causing extra stress for all of us. And I'm going to keep bringing light to that and just say that the in-person, is a problem for some. So I'll just keep bringing light to that and share my anxiety around it, even though I'm not even in person. But we will be soon enough. So I'll just keep bringing light to it.
Thank you, Joe, for your public comments. And will there be anybody else who would like to share a public comment? I see maybe something in the chat. Nothing there. Okay. Seems like that's it for public comments. Move on to the next slide, which will be approving the minutes from our previous meeting, our February 2nd, 2023 council meeting, which will be an action item. So if anybody would like to make a motion to approve the minutes from February 2nd, 2023, open to hearing that now.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Wayne, and will there be any seconds?
This is Joe. I'll second.
We'll go with Joe on this one, though that I realize that might be, that is something we'll have to think about in the future. Okay, so that was Joe Bruno who seconds, and will there be any discussion? And checking the chat, it doesn't seem like there's anybody there. Okay, so with that, we'll proceed with the roll call vote. Starting with Iman Novin,
Yes.
Margaret Schultz. Aye. Harry House,
Aye.
Leslie Gleason,
Yes.
Kiva Dean,
Aye.
Alejandra Chamberlain,
Hi.
Gabriel Lemus.
Aye.
Angela Bullock Hayes. Wayne Earl,
Aye.
Mia Fairbanks. Who's not here today. Deanne Karen,
Hi.
myself am an I. Joe Bruno,
Aye.
Tony Youssefari,
Aye.
Sean Ray. I think I heard an I, very quiet I there. Sean, was that an I?
Sorry, aye.
Thank you. Pat Mims. Jay Delotto. Aye. Janae Thomas.
Hi.
Anastasia Padilla. Okay. Well, either way, I believe the motion passes. Thank you, everybody, for that quick vote. And approving the minutes from the February 2nd meeting. And with that, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is committee report outs. And we'll be starting today with a report out from the Oversight Committee from Michelle. And I will hand it over to Michelle, who I think is on Zoom.
Thanks, Juno. Yes, I am on Zoom. Hi, everyone. This is very exciting speaking to a room of people together and folks on Zoom. Nice to see you all. So what I am here to talk to you about is the complaint policy revisions. And we have an action item today where we will be asking for approval of the proposed revisions to the COC complaint policy. A little bit of background context. So the purpose of it, of the complaint policy, is to make sure that program participants and agencies have a fair and equitable way to process unresolved complaints against COC funded housing, shelter, or service providers, and H3 serving as the COC, HMIS, and coordinated entry leads. And the original policy was approved by the Oversight Committee in November of 2021. And then some revisions have been proposed and reviewed by the Equity Committee in December, and then by the Oversight Committee in February. And so the revisions that were sent to you all in advance and that I'll be going over now have been approved by the Oversight Committee as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we have 6 proposed substantive policy revisions. Our first revision narrows the focus of complaints from all housing and services providers to only COC funded programs. And in addition, the policy now is just limited for individuals to file complaints. Agencies cannot submit COC complaints against other agencies. Second, we propose updating the process for submitting complaints to an online form or completing the form with staff over the phone rather than writing out the complaint in back and forth emails. Third, the revisions further spell out the roles of H3 and the COC complaint review panel. So it doesn't change the actual functions of those two parties, but it just clarifies it and also clarifies the role of H3 as the COC lead and their role as the lead of coordinated entry and HMIS. Next slide, please. The revisions also remove the statement that an agency can lose funding due to a complaint being filed. And that's really because the COC complaint panel does not have that authority. COC funding is determined through a competitive process. Fifth, the form collects demographic information on complainants, and this revision was recommended by the Equity Committee to allow for analysis of who is filing complaints, the nature of their complaints, and how they're being resolved. And then the final proposed revision is that the process for an individual filing a complaint against an agency ends with the COC complaint resolution. So what that means is that a complainant can file an internal complaint against their agency, and then the form of escalation is that it goes to the COC through the COC process, and rather than to the COC complaint review panel. And we're doing that because there's already a chance to escalate, and basically the COC complaint panel and the admin have the same authority in this process. So it was really just adding an extra step without any additional authority. So if we could go to the next slide, I'll just again show this, just shows the visual of that. Again, the way it works is that an individual, if they have a complaint against a service provider agency, they first go through the internal complaint process. And if that is not resolved to their satisfaction, then they can file a COC complaint. And when those are received, if it is against an agency, then H3 processes those complaints. And if it is, and they first check to make sure that the internal complaint process was filed before it gets escalated. And if not, then it gets sent back to go through the internal process first. H3 then starts the investigation, interviews both parties, in some cases collects additional documentation, and then recommends a resolution. For the other process, you could go to the next slide, please. This is if there's no changes being proposed to this, but just as a review, people who are filing a complaint against the COC, they would go directly to filing the complaint. There would not be the internal process. And then this is managed by home base, and we do the preliminary investigation and then convene a non-conflicted panel of oversight committee members, and then that panel recommends a resolution. So that's the general overview. And I think what I'll do now is turn it over to Juno to facilitate any sort of action item or discussion about the proposed changes.
Thank you, Michelle. And we'll move on to, I guess first we'll hear more about some additional information for.
Oh, yes, apologies, sorry. Once the policy revisions are approved, the form is going to be translated by H3 and then also evaluated for reading level to make sure that the form is accessible from a reading point of view. And we've also added questions about the COC complaint process to the compliance monitoring that provider agencies are going through this year. And we have convened our complaint review panel. Again, it's a subset of oversight committee members, and they have received their orientation, and we'll begin reviewing complaints starting next week. I think that's all my presentation now, Juno.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so we have heard a bit about the oversight committee's work on the complaint policy and complaint panel. So would any members like to make a motion to approve the revisions to the COH complaint policy as recommended by the oversight committee on February 22nd, 2023?
This is Deanne. I'll make that motion.
Perfect. And that was Deanne.
This is Tony, I'll second.
And that was Tony with the second. They probably can hear us, but might as well make sure. Okay, will there be any discussion? Looks like
I just wanted, there's a delay. I just wanted to chime in real quick and say that I am very excited about where we are with this, just, it's moving along, we're doing good. That's all I wanted to say. Good job.
I also see that there's a question in the chat that I could answer. So yes, the complaint policy is for participants or clients. So you could have someone, for example, living in, someone who is going through the coordinated entry system, or someone who's living in a supportive housing program, filing a complaint against the housing provider or against H3. So it is, it's not for the employees, it's for the participants or clients.
Perfect. Will there be any other discussion before we do a roll call vote? Okay, doesn't seem like it. So we'll start with our roll call vote, starting with Iman Novin.
Aye.
Margaret Schultz. Aye. Terry House.
Aye.
Leslie Gleason.
Yes.
Eva Dean.
Aye.
Alejandra Chamberlain.
Hi.
Gabriel Lemus.
Aye.
Angela Bullock Hayes. Wayne Earl.
Aye.
Deanne Perrin.
Hi.
Myself, am an aye. Joe Bruno.
Aye.
Tony Youssefari.
Aye.
Sean Ray.
Aye.
Pat Mims. Aye. Jay Delotto.
Aye.
Janae Thomas. And Anastasia Padilla, if she managed to find her way in. Okay.
Yes. Anastasia, are you able to unmute? Or put your vote in the chat?
Okay, I believe the motion would pass either way, but we will look for that vote in the chat. Okay, lovely, everybody. Thank you. And yeah, thank you for the quick work on the action item as well.
Juno, there
Yes,
is a question in the chat. Is this complaint policy for only employees or volunteers within an agency? Or can a homeless person experiencing homelessness file a complaint against an agency with this process? And how does that work on follow-up? So I can take a stab at that. Michelle, feel free to jump in. But this is generally speaking a complaint against an agency or a program within that agency that is covered by the COC. Sometimes folks identify specific staff members and that can be part of the investigation, but it's generally a program within an agency that's funded by the COC, and the follow-up works with, following the process that Michelle laid out, the internal investigation, the H3 investigation, et cetera, and then following up through monitoring with the agency staff.
perfect. Thank you, Jamie S. And I guess a last call for questions about the COC complaint policy before we move on. Okay, thanks everybody, and we'll move on to our next committee report out. It's gonna be a quick one from myself for YAC. We haven't had our meeting this month, putting on my yak hat. We haven't had our meeting yet this month, so I don't have any updates to report out that different than last month, but we should be having it soon. So that's my only update for now. And with that, we'll proceed on to our next committee report out, which is going to be a point in time count committee report out from Jamie Klinger, who I believe is on Zoom.
Thank you, Juno. Jamie Klinger, Research and Evaluation Manager with H3. Happy to talk about the point in time count with this group. Go ahead and move forward to the next slide.
Hey, Jamie, I don't know if you have the ability to use a microphone, but you're kind of echoey. Do you have an ability to use headphones with a?
I don't have the headset, but I have like a 3-minute report out. Can folks hear me sort of okay?
Better.
It's better now if you're closer.
It's better. It's closer. Yeah.
Prefer towards my mic. Is that better?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I also have a cold, so my voice is a hot mess, so I apologize. All righty. So I am so thankful and grateful to report that all in-field pit work, including the observational count and all the survey sampling, which includes data collection, is complete. We have wrapped up all of those activities. It was a very busy 2 months. So survey sampling, in the last meeting, we talked about the observational count. So if there's any specific questions about that, feel free to tag me in the chat. Today, I'm going to talk about the survey sampling that took place over a 3-week period, which took place February 17th to March 3rd. This is where we collected a variety of information from mostly the unsheltered population that described their demographics, their homelessness experience, and a handful of other questions that were particularly important to the COC. And we had amazing participation in this effort. So in years past, we have relied primarily on our core outreach teams to have these one-on-one surveys and interviews that are collected among the unsheltered population. This year, we had our core staff, we had H3 other programs, as well as administrative staff. We had people with lived experience, and we had many agencies participating in this really important event. So I'm not going to list out every single one, but there's a handful of those agencies that are on the slide, and we just thank you for your support, because it is a really big lift to collect this data. Go ahead and move forward to the next slide. So where we're at today, we collected over 400 surveys, which is fantastic. And again, took those every day of those 3 weeks to achieve that goal. All respondents who gave us their information, this was a voluntary activity, nobody's forced, of course. So everybody was willingly sharing their very sensitive information with the folks who were completing these interviews. And participants were compensated for their participation in this 10 to 15-minute survey. The time varied depending on what their household makeup looked like. And they received either a $10 Target or a $10 Starbucks gift card. I will also mention, it's not here on the slide, but we also compensate our people with lived experience for participating in this activity as well. So any time that was spent completing trainings, communicating with our team, and then conducting the surveys and the interviews out in the field, folks receive compensation for that as well. Right now, we're in the data cleaning phase. So right now, we're cleaning up any missing data, any data that showed up a little funny, either in the electronic survey or the pen and paper hard copies. And then we move to the really exciting phase, which is number crunching. Also, we just received the HUD notification this week for when all COCs have to submit this PIT data federally. So that deadline is April 28th. So we've got plenty of time. We're in good standing. We hope to have our initial estimates of unsheltered and sheltered ready much sooner than that, but we do wait to publish everything together until midsummer. People get really excited about the PIT information, which we are also very excited about, but having that real rounded package of information is very important so that we can describe how the sheltered and unsheltered population differs, publish city level estimates, which we're really excited about. And we know that our communities are highly anticipating that data. And then get into, the specifics of the survey data too, and how that information is generalized to both the shelter and the unsheltered population. So I know I've received many emails so far waiting for this information, and we will absolutely do our best to publish that as soon as possible. But right now we're aiming towards midsummer, around July. And I cannot recall if I have another slide or not. I think that might be it. Any questions for me? All right, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jamie, and Christina talking again, and we'll move on to our next agenda item, which will be old business. First, we'll be hearing from, I'm not exactly sure who, but we'll be hearing from someone about public health updates. Looks like from Jenny Roberts, actually, from H3.
Sorry, Jenna, it's actually going to be me. Apologies, I didn't get the time to email an update. But just wanted to take a minute here, since we're clearly at the end of the emergency declaration that allowed us to be all virtual. Folks have been asking, well, are there other changes we are needing to make? What's still the guidance? And essentially, we are still operating under the same sort of guidelines that we've been operating under. Nothing has changed drastically with the end of the emergency kind of virtual allowance sort of situation we were in. So in terms of how you're doing your day-to-day work with people experiencing homelessness, please refer to the guidelines on H3's website. I know they feel old, but they're still relevant. And we are going to be bringing, as things are shifting and changing, as we're kind of getting into the COVID as normal life nowadays, we're going to be bringing those changes to this group as well as other areas like our provider meeting. That is the second Thursday of every month at 8:30. Check our calendar if you want to register for that. But we're going to be sure to be sharing far and wide when there are changes that are impacting folks who are attending this room or this meeting. And yeah, that's my for now update. We're hoping to bring a little bit more in April in a couple weeks when we meet again.
Thank you, Jamie. Yes. Will there be any questions about that? Leslie?
I do have a question. It's about the COVID call center specifically and what our system of care is or is not able to do for people who come to one of us as a service provider and have tested positive. So we want to reassure the public and people we're serving, if they do test positive, what options do they have? What can we still provide to them with some assurance? Because our biggest concern at Trinity Center is that someone will arrive, not disclose that they are feeling ill, and then potentially put others at risk. And we want to make sure people don't do that by being able to assure them that there is a safe place for them to go and isolate and receive the care that they need. So can we talk about how that's moving forward under the non-emergency situation?
Yeah, so like I said, so far nothing has changed other than our kind of meeting format. They're still connecting, they can still be connected to PUI beds or people under investigation beds that are available. They're not very many, and they haven't necessarily been 100% utilized across the board. So we're not expanding those. We also really encourage our providers to make sure that they've got areas on site where they're able to isolate folks who are testing positive. It is nobody wants to be the person turning someone away because they don't have a safe space for them to land. And I think many of our folks have those areas set up in their facilities. So thank you to those who have done that. But yes, I would recommend continuing to follow the process, calling the numbers that are relevant, so 211, connecting to your core teams. There's the county on the county website has the COVID call center that you can connect with. Keep doing what we're doing, and we'll be sure to be sharing things as our guidance shifts or as our resources shift. But yeah, that's the update for now.
Yes, thank you. And I can say, based on our experience yesterday, that so far the system is still working. Someone did come, they were positive, they did get connected with the services and transported over to Delta Landing. So that's great. Our concern, and so we wanted the public to know that that still is happening. And also, heads up, if anything changes, please let us know.
Glad to hear that, Leslie.
Okay, any other questions for Jamie S. before we move on to our next peaceful business?
Is it possible to change the name of PUI bids?
Can I hear who that was? Sorry, I'm gonna,
This is Pat Mims.
great.
Hi, Jamie. Is it possible to change the name of PUI bids? I mean, it's enough already to be, to have COVID. And
Yeah, it is. I think at this point, it would probably be more confusing to change the name and get people used to what they are, because they've been hearing them as PUI beds for 3 years, and they're not a resource that's going to be growing over time as we're, getting adjusted. It's a very small number of beds. So I wouldn't want to create undue confusion by changing the name, but I hear you. The first 2 letters are PU.
And investigation. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds very, I mean, that's the thing that I
Yeah.
stuck on, investigation. That
Yeah.
sounds very negative.
Yeah, I hear that. It's very technical scientific terms, I imagine, that don't necessarily translate to regular folks.
Okay, any other questions? Public health updates. Wayne?
I do have a question. I've heard, I can't confirm, so I'm just kind of putting this out there in case there's someone healthcare from the homeless who can verify this, that the mobile clinic vans are no longer providing vaccines. Is that correct? And if so, where do we direct possible guests that want to get vaccinated or boosters?
That's a good question. And I think that is something I can reach out to Healthcare for the Homeless about and see if they're able to bring more information to our April meeting.
Okay, thank you.
That's a really good question. Thank you, Wayne. Any other questions before we move on to our next peaceful business? Not seeing any hands raised on the Zoom side of things or anything in the chat. We'll move on. Thank you, Jamie S.
You're welcome.
And looks like we're gonna move right on to funding updates. Handing it right back to you.
Sounds good. Okay. Next slide, please. And one more slide. Great. So I'm here with just a short one today. Wanted to bring you an update on the Measure X RFP, request for proposal for the folks. This is your first meeting with us. This was the RFP that was co-developed with the Department of Conservation and Development, and we released back in early January to distribute funds that are collected through Measure X, a voter-approved initiative. We had applications due earlier this month on March 3rd. We received proposals from 26 organizations representing 35 projects. So huge turnout, really exciting. There was about $10 million, it's a ballpark, a little bit more around across multiple funding streams. So not just Measure X dollars, we also included things like our Homeless Housing Assistance Program, or HAP dollars, in this opportunity. We really took the opportunity to put out a lot of the funding streams competitively so that providers didn't have to submit application after application to apply to provide services and receive funding. So we had a little bit over 10 million available, and we had about $25 million in requests from the applicants. So this was a very popular opportunity. Lots of people put forward very ambitious projects. We are working with DCD and Focus Strategies to score applications. We are really doing our job to make sure that there's some neutrality in there. Focus Strategies taking that first pass based on the scoring rubric that was in the application materials. And then we're going to be working to arrange follow-up interviews with folks who requested to have interviews, or folks we might want to hear a little bit more from based on the application. Again, following the process we laid out to try and make it as supportive and low barrier as possible. So hoping, very ambitious timeline to begin award announcements in the next couple of weeks and start to get into contract with some of these dollars to provide services in our community. Any questions?
Woohoo!
I have a question, Jamie. This is Wayne.
Hi, Wayne.
I work with some smaller nonprofits that weren't quite prepared to submit yet. Is this a one-time Measure XRP? Is it a one-time thing, or is it possibly repeating next year?
It's possibly repeating. Some funds will be one-time funds. We had a chunk of dollars that was capacity building funding meant for a one-time opportunity. We don't quite have nailed down when moving forward we'll be putting out the next round of funding. My goal, this is, like I said, a 20-year initiative. So my goal is to get us on a funding cycle where every year people can expect a portion of Measure X dollars to be going out for bid. And on the other hand, some of the funding we're hoping to make more longer term awards so that providers who are doing great services don't have to apply year after year and maybe have 2 or 3 year contracts so that they're not spending more time applying for money when they could be spending that time providing services.
Thank you.
I have a question. I can't remember, Alejandra from County Office of Ed. I can't remember if off the top, this money will be coming back to this group for discussion, similar to what we do with the HUD, or is this just informational? Whoever it should be answering this question, or is this more informational?
It's more informational. HUD money is overseen by the Council on Homelessness as the governing body, but this funding is county general funding. And so it's more informational because the work so closely interacts with our HUD funding. But yeah, that's the role of the council in this particular opportunity.
So with regards to making that selection for providers, who has that decision-making power for this?
Yeah, that ultimately sits with H3 and DCD. So we're working with focus strategies to score those applications and make those decisions. And my goal is to, for those applicants who requested interviews, I think it was Leslie at a previous meeting asked a really great question of how are we involving people's lived experience in these decisions. My goal is to reach out to some folks to see if they'd like to participate on an interview panel and have a voice in the room so that we can make sure that we are doing that in a way that's in alignment with our values.
One more question, sorry.
No.
Will the intent be to keep us up to date and walk us through the process and as this group, continues to look at HUD funding, how Measure Q is funding different programs and being mindful about extending services and not duplicating?
Yeah, that's exactly the intention, is to make sure that because these services are so aligned with our HUD services, that we can really see them as puzzle pieces that go together and make a bigger picture.
Thank you.
And then Joe, I see your question in the chat, time frame for scoring applications. So Focus has taken that first pass of scoring right as we speak. And we're hoping to make some early announcements by the end of the month, but I can't give you more concrete than that.
Tony has a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, so you have a scoring panel or a selection panel or something, and who's sitting on that panel?
Right now, Focus Strategies is sorry, Tony, didn't mean to cut you off.
Not individually like names, but like agency wise.
Yeah, right now Focus Strategies is taking that lead. They're doing a lot of kind of inter-rater reliability is the evaluation term, where their staff are adhering to our scoring rubric, reviewing it, and then checking each other's scores in a very methodological way to make sure that one reader is scoring the exact same as another reader or very similarly. So they're taking that first third-party neutral kind of pass and giving the scores to DCD and H3. From there, we'll be conducting interviews for folks that we might need to follow up with or who have requested to follow up with us because an interview would help them explain their application a bit better. And that's the information we'll take into account in potentially adjusting scores and adjusting funding decisions. So this is sitting with H3 and DCD primarily.
I'll wait till I'll wait till committee members ask their questions and then I'll, as a member of the public, will ask.
Okay.
Gabriel?
I don't necessarily have a question because I've been working with Jamie on this, but it's just more to add and clarify Alejandra's question on whom ultimately makes the decision. Jamie mentioned that DCD and H3 are reviewing the applications and the decision will fall on those two departments, but ultimately, we're making recommendations and the board of supervisors makes the final decision. So that's how all funding goes. So in some cases, some funds go to a committee before it gets to the board, but in this case, it'll probably most likely go to the board of supervisors this round, but that can change in future.
I was particularly interested because I'm following the youth centers component. So they're navigating that through the WDB Youth Committee, and I'm proxy to Superintendent Lynn Mackey on that committee. So I was curious to see how different parts of this Measure Q are being rolled out. So thank you.
Measure X.
Measure X, forgive me. Thank you. And I'm making up and, throwing in whatever you want,
We look forward to Measure Q coming.
And I'll just jump in and piggyback on what Gabriel said, because that's what I was going to say. So the Measure X funding was the allocations were recommended by the Measure X Community Advisory Board, which is a separate advisory body to the Board of Supervisors. And then it was a bunch of different pots of funding. So you all get to hear about Measure X and how it's being spent in the local housing trust fund. Ultimately, as Gabriel said, it falls under the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors have the Measure X Community Advisory Board, which they're developing ongoing, how they're going to sort of oversee programming and how it's rolling out and the impacts. And then they're creating a separate oversight advisory body to do the actual audit on the funds to ensure that they're being spent in the categories that they're supposed to. So all of that doesn't fall under this. This is simply giving you the update as like, this is how it's impacting our system of care, and yay, Contra Costa County voters for giving us this funding so that we can expand the services and the housing options. And it's going amongst a bunch of different categories because it's called the Local Housing Trust Fund. So it's not funding this H3, it's not funding this continuum of care, but it's a funding source that's helping the continuum of care expand the resources. So hopefully that helps clarify. So there's a lot of different areas and a lot of oversight.
Is that Jill?
But this isn't one of them. What's that?
Is that Jill?
It is. I'm sorry. This is Jill Ray with Supervisor Anderson's office.
Thank you. Jill Ray saving my bacon once again. Appreciate that. You both in the room.
Alex, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I guess I have a question. I think it's naive and I guess I don't see it because when I saw the Measure X, I thought the Measure X was $10 million and then in the RFP, it said there's additional funding. But seeing that it's 10 million total, does that mean that it's just combined? Like the other funding sources is the total funding source?
So what was in the RFP was the $10 million that represents kind of the whole housing bucket. The majority of that actually is distributed through DCD's capital funds, and that RFP, what happened in the fall, and Gabriel, please correct me if I'm getting anything wrong. And so we reflected the total Measure X like housing funds, but within the services component of that, that's what was included in the RFP that service providers were responding to.
Which I think is what, 2.5 million?
Thereabouts, yeah.
So for this particular area, there's a 10 million total that went into local trust fund for 22, 23, 12 million ongoing.
I see.
Into the local housing trust fund, which is a huge sort of umbrella of a variety of funding opportunities.
Yeah, I believe that 10 million that's reflected on that screen is 10 million. That is not only that 2.5 million, but additional funds that H3 has from the HAP program and other similar programs that are to address homelessness or to prevent.
So there's another 7.5 million in the housing trust fund to be used in different areas.
Yes, that's correct. That 7.5 million
this year
is also basically there's two RFPs. This RFP is just covering the services side, the 2.5 million. And then the 7.5 million that RFP went out in the fall, and that's to cover capital or development of actual affordable housing.
Now I'm more confused. There were other elements in this, like there was CE money, there was CalWorks money. That's all totaled to the 10 million?
I believe in that slide, yes.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions? Seems we have a lot of experts in the room, so. the time is-
One more, sure, another question. Leslie's got a question.
Leslie?
Yes, hi, Leslie Gleason. So whatever the outcome, and we know there has to be a process and the process will have an outcome and it will be what it is. But some of the excitement about this was to generate new and creative ideas and see what gaps we had and see where those of us who think about it all the time either are or aren't missing the mark, or all those crazy ideas we've been bubbling up in our head and what can we do with them? Is there going to be a way for this group or any group to learn from some of those ideas, to explore some other things besides what we are typically doing? Is there a way to harness the energy and the thinking and the passion that went into these?
That's a great question, Leslie. And I think that what we can do is, as we're kind of wading our way through the applications, is try and come up with summaries and kind of themes to pull out to share back. Because I think that's really true, is we don't want to let these ideas, go into a drawer and just live there forever. If there's something we can work on long term, or if there's, other opportunities out there to form collaborations and take on new projects. So I think that could be something we bring back to this group in a future meeting, is here's what we learned from this process. Here's some of the ideas that we were able to fund, we're not able to fund, we're able to fund partially, and try and give more of that back to this community.
And I see two questions. Sorry, Leslie, was that?
Yes, thank you.
I see two questions in the chat from Joe. Joe, I also see your hand up. Do you just want to talk about your questions or ask your questions?
The ones in the, yeah, thank you. The ones in the chat were taken care of, but I was kind of curious on, I would like to see at the beginning of Measure X, the reason why they did the Measure X was because of X, Y, and Z. These were the purposes, the reasoning. Homelessness was part of that reasoning. That was the purpose. That was one of the purposes behind it. But I would like to see, once this is all once it's over and what the outcome is, how accurate the outcome is to the original request. I would like to see that. And I don't know if that's this team that can do that, or if that's something that I've got to go do on my own, but I don't know if there's somebody that might be able to gather what that looks like.
Can you say more about what you mean about accurate?
Well, okay, so we're in the topic of homelessness. So when Measure X started, what was the reasoning behind homeless? What data did they have to say homelessness needs to be part of Measure X? And then what are we proving that they are covering what the purpose was? Like, what's our outcome? Is our outcome the same as what they were requesting? Why it was part of Measure X? That I think that's where I'm going with that, if that clarifies.
So if I could just jump in, because the language is very clear and it didn't actually call out homelessness, it was to support crucial safety net services. And so it's sort of a catch-all. And I'm happy to share with the Jamies the link to Measure X, and it has the wording, and then it also has the allocations thus far. And you can see in the various areas that the Measure X Community Advisory Board came up with, how the funding was broken up amongst those various areas to meet the intent of the tax language. Would that answer your question, Joe?
Maybe so. Maybe so. It's intriguing. I'm just trying to connect the dots there.
Yeah, and I think to Jill's point, the advisory body would be probably the best place to address the question I think you're asking. I'm posting in the link, the website to Measure X. It's on our ContraCostaCA.gov. So folks can read through all the details and all the history on that page.
Oh, Jamie Jeanette. That's why I like Jamie J. She pulls out it's the language factor, like the impact on homelessness. So yeah, I think that is the question that I'm asking. Yeah, so I'll leave that there. But I think that is really the question that I'm trying to figure out there.
Yeah, and the Measure X CAB is developing those metrics so that there will be an annual report to the Board of Supervisors, which is what the departments who have been funded are responsible to the Board of Supervisors. And there'll be a joint meeting with the MX CAB to review those impacts and outcomes. And there was much discussion at MX CAB last night about that and about the metrics.
Very cool. Right on.
Okay, thank you so much. We have another question from Wayne.
It sort of this plays a bit on what Leslie was asking, what you were asking. In a previous career, in startup Silicon Valley, you end up with a lot of informal sort of skunk works where people that have ideas for startups would come together and it would really jostle people's ideas. You know, like you were talking about, those of us that are providers, or we get so used to looking at it one particular way that someone can have ideas that challenges our assumptions, and being able to look at those things. I really like the idea of somehow creating some sort of forum for things like that. You know, I don't know how feasible that is. I don't know how that would be done, but I like it when my assumptions are challenged. You know. So if there's a way that something like that could be thought about or facilitated, you know, where some of our up and coming entrepreneurs in this space that aren't part of the established providers may come up with ideas that could really make a difference.
That might make a great topic of conversation too at an upcoming executive director meeting. Leslie and Deanne kind of co-chair that group. So maybe that's something to bring to that space.
Yeah, and I mean, my first thought too is there is a monthly provider meeting where it's much more sort of what's going on and who's doing what. And I think that would also be a place to think about innovation and collaboration. And it is, you know, I'd also say, I think if I'm agreed, let's bring in all the new ideas and let's make sure we're connecting them to the existing things so that it's all working as a whole.
And then add in, Alejandra Chamberlain, add in Joe's comment about like the impact on homelessness. And I'm going to give the example of the youth centers. If there's going to be dedicated 10 million to youth centers in East County and Central County, and in 3 years, I don't see a youth center, I'm going to be pretty upset as a citizen of Contra Costa, right? So like, what's the actual outcome that we're going to see and the impact? And then present it to this group so we're actually getting that information. At one point, we talked about an East County brick and mortar for homeless services, and I'm still waiting. So, you know, selfishly, I live in Antioch and I see that impact, and I'm still waiting on my brick and mortar. So to get that information and sharing it here allows us to be that informative body back to, for example, for me, our 18 districts, where our East County districts, Antioch, Pittsburgh, Liberty, and Oakley, is saying, where do we send our families? And I'm like, it's coming, I promise, but I've been saying that for over 4 years. Of course, I get it, the pandemic and all of that, but now it's, you know, I can't use that example anymore, or that excuse.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, our goal is definitely to keep
coming slowly, yes, but I think it's like keeping us up to date. And I know it's been a heck of a lot thrown at us as we all represent different agencies, and I'm not going to disregard that. As a school entity, I know we've been swimming and drowning all at once, right? So I acknowledge that, but yes, hearing those updates in this group would be valuable to all of us who are then taking that information back to our stakeholders.
Yeah, definitely. And just like we did with the development of the RFP, that's our goal too, is to make sure that this group is informed of how all these trains are moving into the station, to borrow Jamie J's phrase, because the work, even though it's not, you know, under the purview necessarily, it's intersecting, it's interacting, and we all, when it gets down to the person who's coming to our front door, we're not concerned about which dollars are paying for it when they're asking for help in front of us. Okay. I think I'll pass it back to Juno then.
Okay. Thank you.
See what happens when you bring us all together again?
This is a wonderful discussion. I feel like I've learned a lot just by, you know, sitting in the room with y'all. So yeah, appreciate that. But, yeah. We'll move on to our next agenda related item, which anyone notes here. We're moving on to new business. There was a lot of lovely discussion. We'll be hearing from, next we'll be hearing from Jamie J though, who will be talking a bit more about our council meeting formats.
I get the fun stuff. So I get to be the school teacher that explains all the rules. So I want to just take a little bit of time to explain this whole, like, why we are all here in a physical room together. So the reason this is happening is because the state, this is a state level decision. It's not the Board of Supervisors. They're actually advocating to hopefully try and get some of this rolled back. But the state has basically said, we've ended the official state of emergency, like we now need to go back in person. One of the things that I will say that I really appreciate the board has done is advocate for things to be hybrid. So it's not just strictly in person. We still have hybrid option for people that are community members. Because I know I personally saw as the person that's like organizing a lot of meetings and interacting with folks, we really increased our participation when we were able to do things remotely. So I'm really glad we're not losing that. And we are all feeling the growing pains of having to like clunkily get back in person. So just to put a finer point, so who's required to physically be in person under the Brown Act, and I'll back up for 1 second. So the Brown Act is a state law that basically is designed to make sure that decision-making bodies, so like, you know, elected officials, but also advisory boards are having conversations and making decisions in a public forum where everybody gets an opportunity to be part of the thinking and discussion. So you're not like in a back room, like making side deals and then being like, oh yes, we just magically decided to all be aligned. So the whole purpose of it is kind of like sunshine, right? To like bring sunshine and light to processes and what's happening. So appointed members, like, so the council members are physically supposed to be in person. Staff don't have to be, but we're always going to have obviously at least one of us here. I'm not just going to throw you to the wolves. Yes, no problem. Not yes, exactly. So we will always have a host for your party. So this came into effect March 1st. And so there's a couple things to let you know about relating to all of this. So it applies to this regular monthly meeting. It also applies to all of our 9 bajillion committee meetings. So recognizing the challenge in particular with parking around here in Martinez, we had the opportunity to do all of our committee meetings here, and I was like,
this is
absolutely
Jane calling
not.
you back about the Corolla hybrid that just got brought in.
Say again?
Sorry, just
Jamie? Are you talking to me? Okay. Right there? I was like, oh. So we found one of the challenges is this decision happened pretty fast at the state level, and we didn't physically have a lot of rooms set up that had the infrastructure like these fancy speakers and cameras. So I found one other room that has better parking that's in Concord that will allow us to do our committee meetings there. So our monthly meetings are officially here, like the monthly council meeting, except for next month, which is a weird one because this room was booked. But generally speaking, this monthly big council meeting will be in this room. Our committee meetings will be over on Diamond Boulevard in Concord and Environmental Health. They have the same fancy speakers, and that's always been my biggest deal was the audio because it's really tricky for people outside. We're still working on the camera, but when in doubt, check the agenda that gets posted. I've also made sure that all of the calendar invites that are on the Google public facing calendar you can get from like our H3 website. I really apologize for your inbox calendar because every time there's an edit or I add an address, I know it sends you a new invite. But we sent the Word document that has everything. We're also, the other piece that we're doing is we're starting to do through constant contact the RSVPs to make sure we're going to have quorum, but also to check who's planning to be in person, who's planning to be virtual. That will also have the physical address. So I know you're getting like a bajillion emails from us, and I'm so sorry, but hopefully this is all getting streamlined. Just been a little crazy behind the scenes. Okay, so the other really important piece, and this is where I'm like, the teacher says, so under the state law, again, this is not our choosing, but the state says you all have for each of your sort of categories of meetings. So for this meeting, you have 2 times a year that you can be virtual if you meet just cause or emergency circumstances, which I'll talk about in a minute. Each committee you're on, you also have 2 virtual options for each of those committees for a calendar year. So the just cause exemptions, first, I'm just going to say that, okay, as according to the language I got from the clerk of the board, if you're going to use this remote option, you need to notify the body at the earliest possible opportunity, including at the start of a regular meeting, of the need to participate remotely. So we didn't officially do that. I think we're still kind of like getting our feet under us, but I think in the future, like that's something you could just put in the chat. Like I'm using just cause or I'm using emergency circumstances because you have to provide a general description of the circumstances necessitating the remote appearance. But then the body doesn't need to do anything. You guys don't need to like approve somebody's remote appearance. The just cause reasons, there are 4 very specific reasons. So one is, and I sent you this information, but I'm also just want to like reiterate it. The need to care for a child, parent, grandparent, grandchild, sibling, spouse, or domestic partner. Again, you only get 2 of these per meeting, but this is one reason that you could do it. A contagious illness that prevents a person from attending in person. A need related to a physical or mental disability that is not otherwise accommodated for. Or, and this one's a little like squirrely, travel while on official business of the body or another state or local agency. So like as a nonprofit, if you're like with a nonprofit, unless you're like at a conference as part of your council membership, that like wouldn't count. But if you work for the county or the state or local agency. So, and Jill, I was like, Jill, you probably have something to say. So I will hand it over to you.
If you have a just cause reason that falls under that category, all you have to say is you have a just cause reason, period.
But you don't have to give
to explain it.
Perfect.
Oh, good.
Love it. So the other one is emergency circumstances. Thank you. And I was like, because you've maybe seen this hit the ground before. We're still new at this. So the other one is emergency circumstances, is a physical or medical emergency. So I was thinking like, I don't know, on Tuesday when we had like trees blowing down and the power going out. To me, that was like a physical emergency that prevents a member from attending in person.
And again, emergency circumstance.
Here, great. So you don't have to be like,
Yeah, it's
my child is barfing. We don't need to.
We don't need to be in
Tony, go ahead.
Hey, remind me, if we can't make a meeting, are we able to send somebody in our stead?
No, well, so no, good question. So Tony asked, if you can't make a meeting as a council member, can you send a proxy? The answer is no, because you all are appointed by the Board of Supervisors as your like actual self. You can send staff to like take notes or stay up to date, but they can't vote or sort of like represent you. It's a good question. You also are allowed 2 absences every year. So like sort of without penalty. And so in that case, just like email us and just let us know. And it really, the biggest thing is we need to make sure that we're going to have quorum either physically and or virtually, because by law, if we don't have enough members, we are not allowed to continue with the meeting.
Physically in the room. You need physically in the room or a official space in the county.
To have physical quorum, even if we have remote, like.
Yes, so if you have a secondary site, like
Yes.
a supervisor's office,
Yes.
that you're going to establish as a posted site, then between the 2 physical sites within the county, you could have quorum. But quorum cannot be made virtually and in the room.
Thank you. That's why I love that you come to these meetings.
Interesting twist.
Okay.
Because then what's the purpose of the just cause? I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, that's really, really good to know. And that's part of it is like, the state really does want everyone in person. Like the just cause is really just in case you have an emergency.
Because if you can't make quorum though.
Yeah, it doesn't help.
Doesn't help.
I wanted to bring up what happened on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Kind of how we reversed it. So with the double power outage, which was fascinating. We elected to stop the meeting because all of a sudden, the Zoom access happened. That's the correct thing to do? or what I'm hearing right now is quorum has to be in the physical room. So what happens if the public they lose access?
Yeah, because part of why, so on Tuesday, just so folks know, on Tuesday, we started the meeting. Actually, the power dimmed like 5 minutes before the meeting and I started laughing because I was like, really, right before our first meeting, we're gonna have power outage. Generator came on in the building. We were cool. We still had Zoom access, so people attending remotely, both council members and public, could still participate. And then about 90 minutes into the meeting, the power in this room completely died, which cut off the camera. And my understanding is that you have to have visual and audio access for it to be considered still like an official forum. But this is actually a good question, and Jill, I don't know if you know, like.
If you have quorum in the room, there is no state requirement to have virtual access.
Okay,
But the quorum has to be in the room, and if you have two separate locations and you can't connect remotely between the two, then yeah, you would shut down the meeting.
okay.
But technically, you could continue the meeting as long as quorum is in the room.
And I don't actually know that we had physical quorum in the room that day. So that's really good to know about the physical quorum. We might have. I'll double check. That's not
meeting you did.
Yeah. That's really good to know. Thank you, Jill. Yeah, yeah.
So the way I'm thinking about it then is, it seems like the video access is really a courtesy to be extended and to invite more participation, but
Yeah.
it's not mandatory for the meeting.
No longer, not under the revised Brown Act. Go out of the emergency state of emergency, then no.
Okay, we're offering it now as a courtesy.
Yeah. And so as a council member, I just need to expect to be here, you know?
Yeah,
So-
that's online, which is what it was
Yeah.
before.
It's what it was before. Yeah, pre-COVID. And I,
Person or you have an excused absence.
yeah. And I know it's,
There's a couple more qualifiers in there, so
Right.
there is a couple more, yeah.
I mean, but we, at one point, we all knew we just showed up. Yeah, right. And then-
I think that
And we got chopped.
I think that the compassionate part of it is many people participated in meetings during the pandemic who had never been able to before because of the remote access. So for those of us that were doing this before, we understand it. For those of people who joined during, this is the huge change, and we recognize that.
I want to jump in really quick. This is Joe. And this is my public comment factor. Like this conversation, what I heard because of who I am, because of my lifestyle, because of the things that I'm, just because of where I am today in life, even just today, like without video, without audio, without virtual options, I would not be part of this meeting. And that is a problem. That's just just a problem. So it's interesting to me that this is the reason why people don't trust the system. The system is made up of people. Well, right now we are being forced to do something that for people like me does not work. So it's interesting because I'm going to do all that I can to be there because I have to be there, but it's a problem. So that's all.
So just so everybody knows, because I've announced this at every single advisory board meeting, this is Jill Ray with Supervisor Anderson's office, because we hear this all the time. The Board of Supervisors is sending a letter to support AB 817, which is the piece of legislation that has been introduced in Sacramento, not by any of our Contra Costa County state legislators, to allow virtual meetings for non-decision-making advisory bodies. And so we are supportive of that as a county, but I suggest anybody who feels strongly about wanting to do that they reach out to their current state legislator. And I know in District 2, that's Rebecca Bauer-Cahan and Steve Glazer. And there's a variety, John Garamendi covers this area. There's a variety of other state electeds that you all could reach out to and just encourage the continuation of virtual meetings for non-decision-making advisory bodies.
reach out as individuals, not as council members, correct?
You could reach out as individuals. There's a variety of individuals in here who are participating in a variety of different organizations, but This council certainly could write a letter of support now that the Board of Supervisors is supporting it, so certainly could as well. If you all could decide to do that. AB 817.
I think that would be important for us to support that, especially like if we were, I'm gonna use the youth. If we were a group of entities coming together to support youth, and we wanted youth to participate, but we didn't allow them to be virtual, then you're basically saying you're not welcome, but just not openly saying that because youth don't have the capacity to drive themselves and make it to meetings and excuse from schools and so forth. So I definitely think that we should consider that.
In this particular case, we have decided as a COC to really push people with lived experience and those of us that do have that lived experience are in different places to where this can be really difficult. So it really, that and the other equity pieces, I think it's really important.
So I can say as a staff member, we will work with, I will get more information about the language in the board letters that are going to the state. And I don't think it's unreasonable to bring something back to you all for our next council meeting. So sorry.
I have a
clarification.
1 second, Joe, there was a hand over here earlier.
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
So in the training that you sent out, which was very interesting, it did say that if you happen to have to need to do it virtually, to attend virtually, you had to provide your address of where you were being virtual.
Yeah, so that's the old Brown Act. That still stands. So if you want to zoom in from home, you certainly can, but you have to post your address on the agenda, and you have to post it on your front door and be willing to let anybody who comes in come into your house to sit in your home and watch the meeting.
Let us know what time to be there, Jay.
Posting it.
You got snacks?
Snacks at this meeting.
Could we look at where potentially another location, like you mentioned, having two different locations? Obviously, this is Martinez. Could we think about another location that would be reasonable? And I'm thinking East County, just because there's probably a lot of us.
Well, and my understanding is that Supervisor Glover's office, physical office is, I need to check in with them, but we got information that they're willing to host that as a public location. So we can figure that out. And Jill, I might talk to you about what that looks like on the ground.
Supervisor Joya hosted the MX Cab. There was one person from MX Cab who sat in his office. He did that last night. They're doing that with Supervisor Glover and Supervisor Joya are both doing it for all their subcommittee meetings.
Okay.
They're opening up their offices. There's 2 offices within the county who are both open to the public.
And they have audio and video.
Oh, yeah, no, it's fully set up.
Great.
Far East County Supervisor Burgess's office is getting set up.
Okay.
But it has to be arranged at the office because, our Danville office is completely set up, has been for a long time. Our Lafayette office is getting set up.
And so just to clarify, so say we had our members here that were physically at one of those locations, that would not count as a remote attendance. They would be.
As long as it's published on the agenda
Yep.
as an alternative
Okay.
location.
Great.
And open to the public,
Okay.
then it's considered in person, as long as it's in the county.
And linked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you link it here and that's what they do, so.
Okay. More complicated, but also more options.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes. I vote for East County.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we'll look into how to make that happen.
Well, as I'm seeing, we do here and then we,
Yep. So I also just want to say how much I appreciate everyone's flexibility. I know this has not been fun and I again apologize for your inboxes as more information came in and just calendar invites were changing. I know it's been complicated, so just appreciate everyone's flexibility, creativity as we continue to stumble along this path.
Well, we appreciate you, Jamie, because this has been a tremendous puzzle with a lot of moving parts, and you've done it with grace and humor and clarity, and that Word doc was very, very helpful.
Oh, good.
So
International trip in the middle of it. I was like, oh no. Keep has her hand up.
I just wanted to echo what the last person said. You have done this, Jamie, with grace. I also want to say that someone brought up for instance, the youth seat. And so unfortunately, I'm in the same situation because, I would assume that if I were representing Contra Costa County, I could go to my agency, organization, CBO, and say, I need reimbursement for mileage from the job to the meeting and back. However, the youth seat and the community representative seat receive no compensation at all for going to or from meetings. So that is something to consider.
And Keith, actually, just to clarify, you bring up a really good point. So we do 3 of the seats on the Council on Homelessness that require lived experience with homelessness include the 2 lived experience advisor seats and the youth representative seat. So those 3 seats do get stipends for their time as well as like travel costs.
Right.
But you raise an interesting question sort of about community seats and some of the other seats. The decision thus far has been for seats that require a lived experience of homelessness, which is just those 3 stipends are attached.
Okay.
But yes, I mean, you know, this is one of the things about being on an advisory council or committee is like, it is work and it does require resources. So that's, you know, that's actually something that the nominating committee can think about, or the bylaws committee as we continue to evolve. Do we want to have other seats that have stipends or that require lived experience of homelessness? That's the question we don't have answers to, but yeah, just wanted to provide some clarity.
Right. And I want just to thank you. And I want to just make it clear that I am not advocating for reimbursement. That's not my point. My point is that there's at least one seat on this council where someone may not be able to go to an agency, CBO organization, or the council to get reimbursement. So possibly that might be the one seat that has the exception of doing Zoom at all times. Just something to think about.
If the state law would allow us, I would be all for it. Thank you.
I wanted to chime in really quick. I tried raising my hand, but it wasn't working for some reason. If we can rewind a little bit, I just want a little bit of clarification around, and so much conversation has happened since then, but the conversation that was around decision-making bodies. So like if me being on the board, I am a decision-making part of that body, and being virtual, does that mean, because I would think that I still have a vote, I still had a voice, I was still able to, I mean, we just did on minutes, but if we're in person in the virtual, like, I just want clarification
Yeah.
on
So I think
that.
Jill, I can provide clarity. I think that's like in a very technical
So
term.
the Council on Homelessness is an advisory body to the Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisors is the decision-making body on all things. So you advise the Board of Supervisors. You're fully advisory. The homeless, healthcare for the homeless is a dual role. So they would not be allowed that pure virtual option. So that's the difference. It's, are you advisory or are you decision making? Yes, you're making decisions on minutes, but you're advising the Board of Supervisors.
Got it. That's what I was looking for. I appreciate that. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off of that. So I think I know the answer after you, but so underneath coordinated entry, those case conference meetings are not decision-making bodies, so therefore it's just exactly.
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I think I hear you asking is, what are the meetings that are bound by this in-person thing? And it's really only Council on Homelessness, monthly regular meetings, and official committee meetings. So PAC committee, HMIS policy committee, you know, those official committees, but sometimes there'll be like a working group of a couple people that get together. We have COC, so we just had our COC community meeting that like was a panel and was like, come one, come all. Because that was not an official council business meeting, I think that's the way to think about it, is like, if there's official business happening where council members have to be there and make decisions or hear stuff so that they can make decisions later, then it falls under that category. But staff is really figuring that out. But like our provider meetings, our community meetings, all that stuff does not have to be in person. So anything basically coordinated entry related, no. We might bring coordinated entry stuff here to this group where you have to be in person and make decisions, but yeah. We are trying to not have things have to be in person whenever possible.
My big concern is our funding.
Yeah.
You know, the NOFO, the funding, and the nominating committee, which
Yeah.
are long,
Yes.
long meetings. Yeah, those are my concerns.
Yep, and we've been having conversations about that behind the scenes and Homebase and Jamie Schechter, I don't know if you have anything you want to say about that now, or that's stuff we're still working out and we'll talk about in the future.
Is the concern about, just spending those long meetings in person? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, like do the like NOFO review and rank and the nominating committee meetings, yes, will probably need to be in person. But I don't know if you have anything that you want to say about that.
So the things that kind of have to happen more behind closed doors, like reviewing of personal applications for seats, getting deep into the review and rank process, those I think we're still sorting through a little bit of how to host the meeting, but it's really great to hear that virtual public access through a virtual setting isn't necessary for those meetings that we've typically kept more private for those confidential sort of discussions.
Yeah. And we can definitely bring some of this back as we learn more. And I'm really going to explore these sort of satellite office ideas. I think especially for, for West County, East County, it's hard to get here. That's like an all-day endeavor sometimes. So more will be revealed. Stay tuned. But I think that's what I have for now. And I actually want to cede my time back. Emily, our intern, Emily Downey, is going to do a really great presentation. So I turn it back to you, Juno, so you can turn it back to Emily.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you for everybody who was part of that discussion. Good thing to be all aware of, and we'll definitely be hearing more about that going forward. So yeah, I'll go ahead and turn over the next section to Emily, who is joining us via Zoom.
Yes, it says Shelby, but it's actually Emily.
Take it away, Emily.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Downey. I am the H3 intern. I'm currently, if we haven't met yet, hello. I am currently getting my graduate degree at Berkeley for my MSW. And one of the projects I've been working on with Shelby, with Jamie, with H3 is really looking at kind of the conversation we were talking about, which is how do we center lived experience in our decision-making, our planning, our evaluation. And so Jamie J created this great event. It used to be called the COC Learning Hub, but it's taking a little bit of a brand change and it's now going to be called the COC Community Meeting. And if we could go to the next slide. This is a meeting that we put on last Tuesday. And the purpose of this meeting is going to be a quarterly meeting for anyone in the community, especially people with lived experience of homelessness, to learn and/or provide input on specific topics related to homelessness in Contra Costa. And the topic for this last meeting that we had was to discuss what are the best practices that are being utilized, can be improved upon in various activities and programs when engaging with people with lived experience, specifically within our COC. We had 51 people participating, and more than half of those who answered the poll identified as someone with lived experience of homelessness, which was a great turnout for something that was so new branding, new ideas that we were presenting to the community. We can go to the next slide. So these are a list of the topics that were discussed at the meeting. We do have a recording, so if any of these topics, or if you're just interested in hearing what was discussed, we do have a recording that I believe could be, I think it's either going to be posted or could be put in the chat. Thank you, Jamie. So we had presenters, mostly those with lived experience who participated in these activities, have an opportunity to talk about what they did in those activities, how they participated, and how those projects had dedicated resources for their involvement. how the work was meaningful, how that engagement was used within the program, how the program or project provided a welcoming environment, and how it also had authentic engagement. And we had a representative, someone who participated as a volunteer in point in time count, someone who was a part of the work group for the participant satisfaction survey. We had 2 presenters come and talk about the resident empowerment program through Hope Solutions. We also had a representative come and talk about how the Office of Consumer Empowerment was involving people with lived experience, talked about the Spirit program and the future of peer support in California. The Equity Committee, Kiva presented on the work of involving people with lived experience in the Equity Committee, and Jamie Schechter presented on some future projects that are going to be coming up in relation to homeless youth initiatives, specifically the Youth Housing Development Project, YHDP funding that is going to be doing a needs assessment for youth and the future hope of how do we involve people with lived experience in the planning, the implementation, and evaluation of those initiatives. And then we had presentation on what is the Youth Action Council and how are they involving people with lived experience in the future of that council and recruitment. And it was just a really great opportunity to hear about so many different projects that have been happening over the last year, and how we are really striving that North Star of addressing barriers to involvement and really making it meaningful for people who are participating.
And I actually wanted to give an opportunity for any of the people that were panelists. There are a few here, there are on the meeting, or anybody that attended. If there's anything you wanted to share about that experience, happy to make a little space for that. I know Kiva and Juno, and I'm trying to think about who else is here. Oh, that link's not working. Okay.
I'll jump in really quick. Yeah, I can't click on another link from that link you first sent, so I don't know. Anyway, but I was just gonna say about this community meeting that happened, I think was amazing. And there is a part of something that Jen was talking about from Office of Consumer Empowerment that I think that we could somehow intertwine into our larger conversations, because the peer support stuff, they have a very specific homeless program that's coming out of the new peer certification in our state. And so I don't know if I should start threading that needle, but that was one of the really great things that came out of this meeting, was that larger conversation between peer support and the lived experience perspective and homelessness.
Definitely. Thank you, Joe.
Okay. And thank you, Emily, for your presentation about this. I don't want to cut you off. Okay. Well, thank you, and thanks everybody who was a panelist at this event. It was lovely, and I learned a lot myself. And also got to speak a little bit about myself too about business. But speaking of business, we're done with new business for now. So we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is announcements. And this is an open time for all to share about announcements about upcoming events and to give brief reports about recent events or trainings related to council. And you could talk about a little bit about what we were talking about earlier about. Actually, I'll step in and say something real quick and spend a little bit of time. I just want to remind and also kind of hopefully incentivize everybody to urge you to kind of reach out to your state legislators to do exactly what we were talking about earlier. For example, Eva brought up a really good point that I hadn't really considered, but was waiting for a good time to talk about it, but I figure I shouldn't anymore. Like most of you know, I used to be in the youth representative seat on the council, and that was kind of how I got into the council. And it definitely would not have been possible for me to take that seat without the remote access. And so it's just, I think it is a little bit, you know, a little bit stressful. And now I'm in a different place and I'm able to maybe do, you know, be here attending and more reliably, but at that point in time, it would not have been possible. And so it would, I think, and it would be quite impactful for, you know, people who are traveling outside county or whatever, but for me as a youth, it was not, it would not anywhere have been something I could handle. So I think I want to urge everybody to reach out so that we can, you know, maybe have that wiggle room there, or you maybe, you know, talking about like for non-decision making bodies, having remote access would be pretty ideal. But you know. Amy?
If you go to the next slide, I do have one announcement. I'm just gonna drop the link in the chat. So just to highlight that there's a guaranteed income event coming up. And there are stipends for participants. So there's the link in the chat. The link is also on the slide. So just wanted to highlight that. I think Joe had her hand up in that.
I did, but it was just to piggyback off of what Juno was saying. And it's a fleeting thought. So I'll just say kudos, Juno. Thanks for, oh, that's what it was. I was going to say as a group, because I think it was, wasn't it? I believe it was Alejandra that said it about doing a collective note to say how we feel about a collective body, advisory body, and supporting the Board of Supervisors. Do we want to do that as a group? Is that something that we should entertain doing? Or are we just left on our own to just individually do it? Because I won't do it by myself.
You weren't physically here, so you didn't get to see me make eye contact with Jamie and go, yes, you're doing that.
Great.
And then she nodded back
Wonderful.
and then she went, yes, I got you.
Yeah,
Got
so
it.
I think we could staff can draft a letter to bring to you guys for the April council meeting related to this.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
And also the satellites, right? Like I don't
Yeah,
want to move away from.
Oh
the
yeah, and we're gonna
things.
export satellite situation.
I have an announcement. The county office of ed is partnering with Department of Rehabilitation as well as the Foundation of Community Colleges to provide employment services to youth 16 to 21 who are experiencing homelessness, definition as defined by LEAs, not HUD definition, just to clarify, who also have an IEP or 504. So if you know the youth, please send them our way. I will make sure to get you the flyer.
Great, thank you. I have an announcement. Okay, so this is Jay, coordination specialist with the VA. So there's two upcoming events. I saw the amazing JR that on the chat, so I'm not super familiar with it, but the stand down on the Delta is coming up. Well, it's coming up in September, so it is happening this year. It's a very popular event. So that's September 8th to the 11th, and that's at the Contra Costa County Fairgrounds. And as we get closer, we'll give you updates and when registration is opening and how folks can register. But it's a great event for a place for veterans to get connected to services in general. And it's not just VA veteran services, VA services, it's also county resources are going to be at that event also. There's also the Veterans Job and Resource Expo coming up April 20th from 10 to 2. And it's not just open to veterans, it's open to the public too after 11 o'clock. And it's the way I see it is kind of like a mini stand-up, but it's a one-day event, and it's going to have a bunch of, it's going to have homeless resources, it's going to have Social Security, it's going to have a lot of resources at that event, not just job resources.
And you'll see more information about that in our COC newsletter too as it gets closer.
Any other announcements?
Hi, this is Leslie Gleason. I don't have an announcement, but a question. I see that the staff report is here in our packet today for those of us who are in the room. I think it probably was on the agenda that was posted. A lot of work goes into this, and this is the staff report to us about what's going on, so we all know. We don't have to talk about it at these meetings. But sometimes we have had the opportunity to ask questions about it in these meetings, but we didn't this time. And I don't have a question, but going forward, will there be opportunities if we have questions about the staff report to ask them at these meetings?
Yeah,
Or if not, who should we ask?
yeah, I think we can add that back in as an agenda placeholder. And maybe sort of like the public health update where we have it on the agenda and if there's nothing, then we just move past it. But yeah, that's fine. We'll take a note of that and make sure we just add staff report review.
Sounds good. We'll make sure that's right.
Like one small process, I personally don't need a printout from the packet, and I just worry about waste and other things, so.
Okay, good. I printed out 20 just in case, and so I might just, maybe I'll check in with folks. Maybe I'll bring like 5 in case there's community members that want them, but yes, I basically brought a whole ream of paper today.
And I see Ling Powers raise her hand.
Chat.
Oh, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hey, great meeting. This is Lang Power with City of Concord. I think I've been updating the group on City of Concord's homeless strategic planning process. And I just wanted to give an update that we have our working group scheduled to kick off next week. We're excited about that. And we anticipate bringing in information and opportunities for this group to participate back to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? It looks like that's in chat, so I can sadly access it right now, but yeah, perfect. Any other announcements? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, then we can finish. Thank you, everybody, for being here, being in person and attending, and we know we do need the in-person forum. So thank you, everybody who also attended over Zoom. We appreciate the willingness to kind of maybe get talked over a little bit. So as we work out the hybrid meeting stuff, wanted to highlight a few upcoming meetings before we move on. First is going to be our next COH meeting, which is April 6th. 1 through 3 p.m. We're still figuring out the location on that. It might be in the.
We actually know. It will be at the Concord location that's also on that slide. So I will remind you, but it will be in Concord just this 1 month.
Okay, and yeah, so it'll be in the Concord location. You can definitely check from emails from Jamie for the address. That'll definitely be there. And also remember we need the physical quorum to attend. So we can hold that meeting. And then next thing to kind of highlight, there will be our committee meetings as normal coming into the month, but I believe they're all also going to be at the Concord location.
Correct.
So that's something to look forward to. This is a more centralized location potentially for everybody to meet up at. And it looks like the HMS policy committee meeting was canceled for March, which is, I don't believe that's, yeah, so there's that as well. Okay.
When in doubt, just email me and I will help you orient to your schedule.
And also, you can also check on the Contra Costa County cchealth.org for the calendar and roster there. I just have my calendar linked up there, so it's a good place to do that. But Jamie is always on top of it too. So
I try.
okay, I think that's it, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and looking forward to seeing all of y'all again next month.
Great job, Juno.
Thank you.
You did it.
Are you just in East County?
No, we're all of the county. Our services are all the county. I support the 18 districts.